Hello and welcome to this webinar on VISTA leader roles in member recruitment. VISTA leaders often have a significant role in recruiting VISTA members for their projects. So this session looks at some of the ways those roles and offers an opportunity for leaders to share what works. I'm Andy King, Senior Training Specialist with AmeriCorps VISTA, and I'm coming to you from my home in Washington, D.C. Also joining us today are Kim Adams and Jeff Banas. They're with our partners at LSI, and they're managing the webinar technology for us today. You'll see them in the chat providing technical support as well. In terms of session goals, here's what we hope that you'll get out of this webinar. By the end, we'd like you to be able to, first of all, identify the elements of a VISTA recruitment plan, and then describe the appropriate roles for VISTA leaders throughout the recruitment process. I hope you'll be able to develop a recruitment timeline based on when you expect your VISTA members to start. And then hopefully you'll gain some strategies here that are shared by other VISTA leaders that you can apply in your own service. So with that, let's get right to it. Let's start by looking at the 6 stages of the VISTA recruitment process. We'll use these stages as a framework for our discussion. And this is a good place to acknowledge that this model that we're going to use was originally devised by a group of VISTA leaders. It's been a few years ago, and over time, we've continued to build on their work and expand the VISTA recruitment framework. And now we've even incorporated into the VISTA campus page for supervisors on recruitment. So you can see here the 6 steps or stages, maybe, of VISTA member recruitment: plan, market, screen, interview, select, and engage. And I'll mention these stages aren't always discrete steps. We call them steps, but there may be some overlap among them. And you might circle back to previous stages before you actually complete your recruitment. And depending on what your onboarding situation is, you might be straddling a few stages at once because you might be bringing on VISTA members at different times. And so you'll have more than one process underway at the same time, and each of those processes having its own time frame. So now we're going to look at each stage, and we'll look at how VISTA leaders can be involved in each one of those. The first phase is to plan. And before embarking on any planning process, it's important to get clarity on your goals and your desired outcomes. So that can guide your planning. And this is also true, we think, for a recruitment plan. So we encourage you to start by reviewing the recruitment targets for the VISTA project. How many VISTAs do you hope to bring on? And when would they start? What time of year? Often your project director would have that information for you if you don't already have it. And then using the VISTA project plan as well as the VISTA assignment description, or the VAD, you can identify the skills and knowledge that candidates need to succeed in their position. And remember, skills needed for year 2 or year 3 of a project might be different from the VISTAs who were there the very first year when the project was getting started. And then you might also identify what you think are the top 5 personal effectiveness competencies that a VISTA candidate would need in order to be able to succeed in that role. So looking further at what goes into a recruitment plan, as a VISTA leader, you can take some of that general information about how many VISTAs are going to be recruited, and the skills they need to bring, and use that to develop a more detailed recruitment plan. There's a sample on the VISTA campus that you can use and adapt, and it includes some of these elements that might go into your recruitment plan. An outline of the steps for marketing, screening, interviewing, selection, all of those phases that we saw just a second ago. a recruitment task list that outlines specific tasks, a recruitment timeline, and we're going to talk about this in just a couple of minutes. You'll also need some kind of a tracking system, whether it's maybe using your calendar or some other systems you can stay on track with your milestones and deadlines. You'll also want to be thinking about who else will be involved in the recruitment process, in every stage of the recruitment process, and what those roles would be. And then finally, you want to prepare some additional materials like interview questions or program information that you can send out to your applicants. So documenting this process, whatever process it is that you're using, along with some information on the results of your efforts, will make recruitment a little bit easier the next time around. A useful way to organize your recruitment plan is with a recruitment timeline or calendar. And there's a template on the VISTA campus to help you get started. Again, this was developed by those VISTA leaders, and it's been really helpful for a lot of VISTA projects. The way it works is you start with the date that you expect to bring on your new VISTAs. You put that in at the top of the spreadsheet there. You can see it's circled where it says start here. You enter the date, and then the spreadsheet automatically calculates some recommended dates for key steps in the recruitment process. It's built in Excel, so you can easily adapt it to suit your needs. So you can add recruitment steps that aren't here, or you can shift the time frame for certain activities. Building out the calendar well in advance can help identify obstacles early on so that you can adjust the plan to avoid those conflicts. So you might want to check vacation schedules against this recruitment timeline, have your interviewers block the time on their calendars during the weeks when interviews are going to take place. And you might also note important dates like your organization's annual fundraiser or maybe the start of the school year and try to avoid conflicts there as well. VISTA leaders often play a key role in coordinating all the recruitment activities. So having a timeline or calendar, whether it's this one or one that you create, is going to be a really important tool to keep this whole process on track. So let's shift a little bit and now talk about the next phase, which is marketing. And this phase includes all the ways that you're going to let prospective applicants know about your open VISTA positions. In talking about marketing, we're going to look at your VISTA assignment description, well, not yours, but the assignment description for the VISTA members that you expect to bring on, the service opportunity listing, and then we'll talk about different outreach and advertising strategies. First up, the VAD, the VISTA assignment description. I'm sure you know that a well-written VAD is the foundation for successful recruitment, placement, as well as retention of your VISTA members. And, a good VAD is created specifically for that position, in that year of the project, and eventually for the individual candidate that you eventually recruit. As a leader, of course, you're not responsible for creating the VAD. That's a role for the supervisor, but you can use the VAD in recruiting strong applicants to fill these open positions. The VAD outlines service activities that the member is going to perform, so you can use those activities to identify specific competencies that you're going to look for in your applicants. And if it's not clear from looking at the VAD, you'll want to talk with the supervisor to get some clarity about what they need, what specific skills, knowledge, does the individual need to be familiar with the community? Do they need to have certain kinds of experiences? And you want to focus in your recruitment, you want to focus primarily on attributes that you need the candidate to bring with them versus things that you can teach. And some of this information that you pull together will help you determine whether you could do better recruiting candidates from within the community or doing a broader or maybe even a national search. So you want to imagine what your ideal VISTA would look like for your program, and then tailor your outreach towards that ideal. And one way, of course, to market your open positions is through the service opportunity listing that shows up in My AmeriCorps. So let's talk about that for just a minute. The service opportunity listing should be created based on that list of competencies you developed, from the VAD and your ideal candidate profile. It's similar to a job description, and it is one main source of information about the position. You probably know the listing gets uploaded in eGrants, but then it shows up in My AmeriCorps, and that's where applicants can view it. There are literally thousands of opportunity listings on the site, so you need to make yours stand out from the rest. Your listing should generate interest and excitement, and it needs to result in the viewer taking action, that is, actually submitting an application to your listing. You want to be creative with your information and the descriptions that you develop, and especially put some effort into the 2-line description, because that's what prospective applicants are going to see when they're scrolling through the long list. What distinguishes your program and your opportunity from all the others? Why should someone consider your program? What's in it for them? And can you articulate that in a way to attract your desired candidate? In order to help you craft your opportunity listing, VISTA has developed a job aid for this. It's a resource that includes a list of the information that's required in order to create an opportunity listing, as well as information to help you successfully create and post it. There's also an on-demand webinar for supervisors on crafting compelling opportunity listings. Anybody can watch it, but you'll find it in the supervisor section of the campus. Let's talk a minute about promotion and outreach. Here's how I like to think of these two topics. There's some overlap between them, but each has some unique approaches to it. Promotion is disseminating information intended to increase the reach of a product or a brand in order to increase its popularity. This is generally broadcast type communication, so things like the opportunity listing, advertising, social media, print media, broadcast media, if you can do that. So you get the idea. It's really the broadcast approach. Outreach, in my mind, is focused more on activities. And these are activities that try to initiate some communication with someone or to engage an audience in some way. So in outreach, we typically think of recruitment events, job fairs, but it could also be communicating through your partners, like maybe it's the college career office, or it's the community service center, the volunteer center at the local college, or working through your partner nonprofit organizations. So we'll take a look at some examples of these in just a bit. So in terms of promotion strategies, earlier we talked about identifying your target audience based on the skills needed for the position, and then thinking about who might be interested in serving in that role. You want to take that now and come up with some strategies for reaching that specific audience. That is, finding people who have the personal and professional competencies that you're looking for. You could identify community groups and organizations that have direct contacts with your target groups. They could become partners and help spread the word or provide you with networking opportunities. Baby boomers who've recently retired, may be the largest group of skilled workers available, yet recent college grads are the largest group that actually joined VISTA, as you can see in the demographics listed on the screen. There may be value in trying to recruit from both, but if you think about it, the messaging, the marketing, and the outreach methods that you use are going to be different for each. While university recruiting is a tried and true strategy, we do encourage sponsors to explore alternative talent sources like career training programs, community colleges, and employment-focused organizations like Dress for Success, Goodwill Industries, Career Centers, and Job Corps. Develop your message for your target audiences and as well as the media that you will be using. As a VISTA leader, you'll want to get approval from the VISTA project director or the supervisor before you post the opportunity listings or send out other messaging. The center point of your recruitment is, of course, your opportunity listings on MyAmericorps, but by itself, it's usually not enough to get you the applicants that you need. An effective strategy will include some combination of posting your position on hiring sites like Indeed and Idealist, promoting it on LinkedIn, using your social media channels, and maybe some listings or ads in print media like magazines or newspapers or their online equivalents. Don't forget your own organization's website. And in some environments, old school techniques like posters, flyers, brochures, and good old word of mouth might work best. All these methods can point people to you or to your organization, but at some point, interested individuals are going to need to apply using MyAmericorps. As a VISTA leader, it may be easier for you to identify some approaches that will appeal to your target audience, since you're a VISTA member yourself, and you might suggest something new and fresh to boost your organization's recruitment. But be aware you might encounter a "we've never done it that way before" attitude. So you're going to want to be prepared with your rationale for trying out these new techniques. This will be your opportunity to be innovative and engaging. So now's your chance to share your experience. What kinds of things is your project doing in the area of promotion and outreach? Please enter your idea in the chat panel. Make sure you send it to all presenters and attendees, or what does it say? All panelists and attendees, sorry, so that everybody can see what you're sharing. And we'd love to hear what works. If you come across some things that seem to really work well for your project, this is your chance to share. All right, so see a couple of online and social sites, Facebook, LinkedIn, Handshake. A few of you have mentioned Handshake. It's being used a lot by college students in certain university settings, so it's great there. Let's see, pre-law programs in colleges and universities, Craigslist job fairs. Let's see, Micah says they probably get most of their applicants from Indeed. Yeah, those of you who are in places where there are college campuses and a college town, those work well. Let's see, Hannah talks about the career offices and actual, individual professors can do promotion. So that's, kind of the word of mouth, like getting a professor on your side because there's a really trusted voice in that community. So it can work really well. Let's see, Allie mentioned the Peace Corps career page. And Reddit as well. I didn't really know how much Reddit would be used in this, so it's good for me to know. That's new information for me. No, Robin comments that she doesn't tend to see candidates moving from Handshake into the portal. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if there's a way to figure out what, where the disconnect is. They maybe are interested up front, but not taking action. See a few more of you mentioning Indeed being useful. These are great. You guys are really keeping up. Let's see, and Vika mentions their coalitions recruiting locally, which seems to work well there. Yeah, more and more of you are talking about Reddit. Okay, that's great. I'm gonna add that to the list of things that I know about. All right, and Allie is a returned Peace Corps volunteer, is speaking from personal experience. So they're getting a lot of returned Peace Corps volunteers, so that's great. All right, so these are all super helpful. I'm going to be collecting all these suggestions afterwards, and I'll post them along with the recording of the session. So thank you very much for sharing. All of those are great ideas. So let's shift now and talk about advertising. People want to know how something is going to benefit them, whether that's personally, professionally, financially, or in some other way. So you've got to make sure that your advertising helps the reader clearly see some benefit right away. And remember, thinking about your different target audiences, you might highlight different benefits for different targets. For example, recent college grads may be more excited to know about how they can use the NCE benefit after their year of service, whereas a retiree may be more driven by the opportunity to apply their skills. You know, they've developed a lifetime of skills, they want to put that to use and maybe take on some new challenges in the community. It works well when you can help potential applicants see how the opportunity will be a win for them and a win for the organization or the community. They want to gain something from the experience while also leaving their mark and making a positive impact. You can showcase some of this in your promotional language, using active verbs and adjectives, highlighting benefits for the member as well as the community, and pointing out how VISTA members make a lasting difference. You can take this a little further during the interview when you have a chance to talk about the applicant more about the position and their motivation for it. You might feel confident in your approach and your materials, but it's important to get feedback. You'll want to avoid using too many acronyms or language that only internal people would understand, but also having other people, particularly from different age groups and all different demographic groups, read your materials or look them over will give you some great insight about how effective they might be. So show your recruitment ideas to staff members as well as to someone else who knows nothing about AmeriCorps VISTA, and ask them if they could understand what the position is about. Does it sound exciting to them and appealing? And if there's something that they think you should add in order to, really enrich what you've already developed. Feedback from external audiences, especially those who are part of your target audience, can be really eye-opening. So, in talking about outreach earlier, I mentioned that I think of outreach as activities that I try to initiate communication with someone or to engage an audience. And often outreach involves in-person settings where you can meet and connect with people, or it could be a venue where you can showcase your service opportunities. But outreach can also include strategies that involve others in sharing your message, as I alluded to earlier. One such approach is to use a proxy to promote your opportunities for you. In this approach, you could have a college career office or community service center doing the promotion on your behalf. Another would be to work through your network of community partners like other nonprofits, schools, maybe neighborhood associations, and community coalitions, and ask them to promote and publicize your opportunities to serve with VISTA. Of course, there's word of mouth. This can be a big influencer for many people who decide to join VISTA, so it's important to account for this factor. The trouble is it's really hard to get word of mouth to spread very far without some real concerted effort. And this is why it's so important for VISTA sponsors to share stories of their VISTA members on their websites and newsletters, on social media, and all the other ways that they're talking about the organization. And it's just as important for individual VISTA members to talk about what they're doing with their friends and family, with former classmates and teachers and professors, and through broader means like their own personal social media and blog posts. The more people know about VISTA, the easier recruitment is going to be. But these methods, these sort of word of mouth ones, often get less attention because it's hard to draw a clear line between those efforts and actual successful recruitment. We're probably most familiar with direct outreach activities like recruitment events and job fairs, and these can be very effective, especially if the event organizer does a good job of getting the right people to the event. Again, you're going to need to stand out in the crowd of other groups that are also trying to recruit, and then make it easy for potential applicants to walk away with a clear idea of what you offer and how they can take the next step to apply. I want to say a few words about rural recruitment. VISTA member recruitment within rural communities will likely require more personal touch and connection to the community. Residents here typically place a lot of value on knowing one another and being from the community or being a part of the community. So if you're a relative newcomer, you might not be the best spokesperson in that community. So you may want to engage a well-known member of the community to spread the word for you. Houses of worship, community centers, and social organizations all have built-in networks that could provide a means of connecting with the community, or they may otherwise assist you in the recruitment process. Most rural communities have people providing service in lots of different forms, though it might be called something else. Many houses of worship have ministry programs that provide services for the sick and elderly, just as one example. I'm also amazed at the reach of civic and service organizations across the country. It seems like every small town has a Kiwanis Club, a JC's, or some other organization that engages people in service in some way. They can become great partners in spreading the word about service opportunities available through AmeriCorps and VISTA. If your organization engages community volunteers, those volunteers can also spread the word about your VISTA opportunities among their family and friends and coworkers. And we sometimes see community volunteers who are already involved with your organization take on a bigger role by becoming a VISTA member. Schools and sports leagues are also a great way to reach young people. The other approach to recruiting for rural opportunities is to recruit someone from another location. Just like many people are attracted to the Peace Corps for its international experience, you can recruit nationally by focusing on the unique highlights of your community. So think about commercials that make a remote and seemingly desolate place look riveting and exciting. You definitely don't want to lie but you want to talk about what makes your area special. One VISTA supervisor noted that she was able to boost rural recruitment by highlighting her position as a domestic adventure. So no matter what type of recruitment you're doing, never underestimate the power of a good, compelling story that's told in a new way to get people's attention. All right, so I'd like to hear from you again. What outreach strategies have you used effectively to recruit strong VISTA candidates? And it could be, you know, maybe you're in a rural area, maybe in urban or suburban. Again, we'll use the chat panel. And looking forward to your ideas. Yep, and as Jeff says, all panelists and attendees to make sure that everybody can see it. So what kind of strategies have you been using that seem to bring in strong VISTA candidates? Are you doing the job fairs? And I mean, some of you mentioned a few of these on our last one. All right, Maria presented to the Chamber of Commerce meeting and to churches as well. Awesome. Charlotte mentions using videos of VISTA members to tell their stories. Yeah, so that first person account can be really compelling. To hear somebody who's doing it, talk about what they do and why, can be a great way to attract people. Ashland talks about using the same pools where you get volunteers to attract VISTA members. Reaching out to friends who have children in college. Yeah, and many of you are mentioning those colleges, universities, and schools. And someone, I don't see it now, mentioned some of those promoting it as like a 5th year of education, 5th year experience. I see Kaylee says a lot of their applicants find out about it through My AmeriCorps. So that's good to hear. We are aware that My AmeriCorps is not the most exciting type of website, and it's not the easiest to navigate. So we're working on that, but it's a long-term project to get that replaced. All right, so I'm seeing sports programs, word of mouth, talking about what I do. Thank you, Rebecca, for doing that. Cheryl talks about the personal touch, particularly in a rural area, getting that community connection through church groups. Using existing networks across the state. Lisa recruits from exiting 4th-year AmeriCorps members, all right. And Tyler talks about partnerships at high schools and universities has been effective there. All right, great. Well, thank you for sharing all of these ideas. You know, there were a couple of other examples that I had heard. I'm not sure if these got shared with everybody or not. Having a coffee house, like sort of a drop-in coffee house event where people could come and learn more about AmeriCorps and VISTA. And certainly that kind of thing would be easier to do where you've got a lot of potential applicants nearby, so maybe a college campus could work well there. And someone else had talked about setting up a recruitment table at the rehearsal or the practice for commencement activities. Of course, this year things are a little bit disrupted around college commencement. But that might be, if that's an opportunity, that might be a nice way to get in front of people. All right, so thank you again for sharing there. Let's move on and talk about screening. So assuming you do a phenomenal job in your marketing, you're soon going to have a long list of applicants in your work basket to review. So let's talk about what that review process might look like. The main goal of screening is to identify applicants whose skills and experience will best match the needs of the position. The screening process is also a good way to give your applicants more information about the VISTA program, your specific VISTA project, and the position that they've applied for. So you're going to want to outline two standard processes to streamline the screening process. First, you're going to want to have a screening tool, some kind of a rating sheet or a checklist that you can use to identify the competencies, the skills, the knowledge, experiences, and all the other things that your applicant brings, so you can easily put them side by side and do some comparison. And of course, the tool would be built using a list of things that you developed when you looked at the VISTA assignment. Secondly, you're going to want to develop some standard communication templates to make it easier to respond to your applicants, answer their questions, and make sure that they all have the same information about the opportunity. Things like the terms and conditions of VISTA service, the living allowance amount, and other practical details about serving. So here's a sample of what a screening process could look like. First up, you would review the list of applicant ratings that you created using your tool. You would identify any areas where more information is needed or would be helpful from your applicants. Then you would conduct some initial screening calls. These would allow you to get some more information on their motivation and their sense of commitment. You want to find out what interests them about your position. Why do they want to serve with VISTA? You know, does this fulfill a dream of theirs? Or did they apply to every position in town? Are they passionate about the work involved? Or are they just looking for a way to move to Montana, for example, or wherever you're located? Here again, you can reinforce information on the living allowance and make sure that they're aware what the amount is and understand what it's like to live on that amount. Get them to realize that they might need other resources, you know, beyond the living allowance. It's also a chance in this call to answer questions that the applicant might have. Third, then you're going to develop your short list. You'll apply your screening and selection criteria along with this additional information that you got on their commitment and motivation. You'll narrow it down and start to put them in order of, you know, who's at the top and who's towards the bottom. And then you'll review this with your supervisor or the project director. Finally, we have the, not finally, but next we have the interview phase. By the time you get to the interviews, it may have been several months since you first developed the recruitment plan. So this is a good time to review and update it. Based on the applications you received, are there any interview questions that you would add to the list that you created earlier? Any that you would change or delete? This is also a good time to create a specific script for the interviews and then to assign questions to the various interviewers who are going to be involved in the process. It's really important to be consistent in the questions that you ask all candidates. That'll make your selection easier and also makes it fair. Also, you need to be specific within your interview panel about why you're asking a specific question and what you hope to gain from it. There are some sample behavioral interview questions, as well as some illegal questions that you need to avoid. They're in a resource on interviewing VISTA applicants. You can find that in the recruitment section on the VISTA campus. But we'll paste a link there in the chat as well. And during the interview, realize the interview is a two-way process. The applicants are checking out you and your organization at the same time that you're interviewing them. So put yourself in their place. You know, if someone's going to be relocating, think about what needs they're going to have as a relocating VISTA and what questions they might have. The VISTA candidate is serving in, in their own hometown, they're not moving anywhere. Help them understand what their new role would look like and how that might be for them. You should always conduct interviews with the supervisor or the project director, as they're the only ones who are authorized to select VISTA applicants, and they need to have the first-hand knowledge of those people that they select. So after narrowing down the list of applicants through screening and identifying those best suited for the position, keep in mind that your first choice applicant might not accept the position after all. They might go with another VISTA position, they might take a different kind of job, or they might have something else happen in their life that prevents them from serving. And as some of you probably know, this happens pretty frequently. So to avoid having it derail your whole recruitment process, it's important to identify backup candidates and then stay connected with them so that they don't lose interest. Of course, you can't promise the backups a position, but you can let them know that they're still in consideration. Above all, be honest with the backups about the situation that they're in. So in the interview stage, here are some leader roles that are appropriate for VISTA leaders in this phase. Leaders often take a leading role in monitoring the interview plan and paying close attention to deadlines and target dates. As leaders, you may be expected to schedule the interviews, set up the conference calls or the video conferences, and then add those to everyone's calendar. You'll probably also be the one to set up a system for tracking the interviews, collecting the interviewers' notes and ratings, and compiling all that information so that it's easily reviewed. And once you've done that, then you're going to provide all that information to the supervisor or the project director who actually makes the decision on which applicants to select. You can, of course, provide your thoughts and recommendations to be part of the selection process, but the final authority and responsibility rests with the supervisor. All right, so here's another chance for you to share with your colleagues. If you've been involved with interviewing, do you have any tips or suggestions on what works? Maybe things that I didn't mention in my brief overview. Are there particular questions that you found really helpful? There was a comment earlier about a challenge of getting quality candidates. People apply, but they end up not really being very serious. So, is there a way that you can sort of sort through, who the really serious contenders are from others who are just kind of casually sending out applications to everybody? All right, so some great suggestions here. Andrea talks about emphasizing the difference between capacity building versus direct service. Always good. Maria, focus on being a good listener and let their answers guide you to the next question. Dika talks about specific program questions, so maybe getting information on what people can bring to fill that specific role. Peyton talks about reflection. So after the interviews, making sure you debrief and understand what worked well, what didn't, so you can do make improvements the next time. Yeah, Duana talks about that indirect service. Are you comfortable spending more than 50% of the time in an office setting? Indeed. Cheryl talks about interviewing as a team. Pooja talks about in the initial one, covering the basics, reminding them about the benefits and the details of service. Robin has a great question. When have you failed to keep a commitment? Brilliant. All right, so a few of you have talked about maybe a two-step process if you have multiple sites, which I know a lot of your organizations do, or maybe you're an intermediary and you do sort of one level of screening and interviewing centrally, and then you sort of pass along the top quality ones to the site supervisors and let them do the second round and the final selection. So that seems to be common and seems to work well. Jacqueline asks about, what does your ideal supervisor look like, and to talk about conflict management styles. So this can be really good because sometimes it's a little bit of matchmaking, in placing people in the right position with the right supervisor. So if you've got multiple sites and multiple supervisors, you might be able to do some of that if you have all the information there. Yeah, ask them why VISTA makes sense for them at this time in their lives. Or what are you looking to gain through your year of service? How does VISTA fit into your long-term goals? These are all great questions. And yep, Kaylee says they call all their candidates to screen them before the interview. All right, well, keep these coming. If you've got other ideas, again, I'll collect all of these and I'll share them afterwards. Let's go ahead and move on and we'll look at the next phase. We'll talk just briefly about the selection step. This is primarily a supervisor role, but there are some ways that you might be involved as a leader. As part of the selection process, someone is going to need to check the applicant's references, and that might fall to you. You're going to want to contact the applicant's references to verify that the key information in your application is correct, and in some cases, to get additional information on their past performance. It's often the leader who contacts references, so you might expect to play this role. Assuming that the references check out, then it's the supervisor or the project director who will offer the applicant a position. As I mentioned, only the supervisor can select candidates in e-grants, and that then sends a notification to the applicant telling them they've got to log into My AmeriCorps and accept the position. Sometimes those automated messages can get caught in a spam filter, so it's a good idea for the supervisor to email the applicant separately about the offer and let them know that they need to accept it in their account. It's best that any initial communication about being selected come from the supervisor rather from you. Also, it's important to know that the supervisor selects the applicant, but it's the CNCS state or regional office that officially approves the individual for service. And that can happen only after the applicant has accepted the offer in My AmeriCorps. So you probably know about all those steps, but I just thought I'd mention them. Once the applicant has been approved by the CNCS state or regional office, then they become what we call VISTA candidates. And at that point, you can manage all the follow-up communications. You'll need to explain the next steps so that they can meet deadlines and be well prepared for their VISTA service. So here are some suggestions on information to send in your follow-up communications to your candidates. You want to confirm their service start date, the address of the location where they will be serving, provide the name, title, and contact details of their immediate site supervisor, along with the names and details for other important people on the project. And just say a word or two about their roles. And remember to include yourself on that list. Your candidate will start getting communications from VISTA headquarters, but it might be good to mention their onboarding steps. You know, they're going to need to complete their onboarding forms in My AmeriCorps, like the direct deposit stuff, and then complete the pre-service coursework on the VISTA campus. We recommend that candidates print out a copy of their VAD from My AmeriCorps, take a look at it, and then write down any questions they have before they get started. So the final phase of VISTA recruitment is the engagement phase. And why engage? What are we talking about here? Well, do you believe in ghosts? You might once you go through the cycle of VISTA recruitment. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Have you been through your recruitment process, selected your ideal candidate, only to have them disappear in a couple of weeks before their start date? Have you ever been ghosted? It's more common and becoming more and more so. So we at VISTA, we added this phase to the recruitment process to help you keep your candidates engaged so that they don't disappear before their first day of service. You want to keep your candidate engaged between the time they're selected and the day they're scheduled to show up. As you know, it's common for individuals to apply to other opportunities outside of VISTA. So you want to make sure that your VISTA position remains top of mind for them and it stands out as an excellent opportunity. You also want to smooth the way for your candidate to serve, removing barriers and reducing their concerns so that they have fewer reasons to change their mind. Here are some ideas to keep VISTA candidates engaged until they start serving. There may be others better suited to your project and your community. Some of these might require a little bit of advanced thought and planning, while others can be done off the cuff. So first of all, try to check in with your candidates on a weekly basis. Help them prepare for service and to build their excitement. For example, you could email them an article about your organization or some aspect of the project. You could include some background information or some advanced reading to help them get oriented and to start feeling a sense of connection with your VISTA project. Your message could include a personal note about how excited you are for them to be joining the team. You might also send a story about what the other VISTAs have been working on, again, helping them to feel part of things early on. If your candidate will be relocating to serve, consider what they might need in terms of housing opportunities or information about the community. Information from the Chamber of Commerce or the Visitors Bureau might help them feel excited about living in a new place. And then a couple of weeks out from their start date, you might check to see how they're doing with completing their onboarding forms in My AmeriCorps and their pre-service coursework on the campus. See if they'll be able to participate in the Countdown to VISTA webinar, the Countdown to VISTA service webinar that happens a Tuesday prior to starting service. If they don't have a computer or internet service, you can invite them to participate from your offices. All right, so finally it's time to hear from you again. You've already been doing a little bit in the chat. What ideas do you have for keeping your candidates engaged between the time they're selected and the time they start? Ashlyn talked about sending them a newsletter and then putting them in it when they get started. That is great. Yeah, a few of you are just commiserating about ghosting. It's real, people. Let's see what else. Oh, Jacqueline talks about sending volunteer opportunities in their food banks, adding them to a Facebook group for all AmeriCorps members in the city. Thank you, Georgia. Valerie says they created a welcome packet as the Ally. That's great. Ryan talks about site-specific and city-specific resources to surviving on the living allowance. Great. Jacqueline, they have a Slack for their VISTA project. Info packet, onboarding packet, welcome packet. Wow, you've got it covered. Micah provides information, housing resources, SNAP benefit, regular check-in emails. Awesome. Housing guide in Chicago from Andrea. Lisa invites candidates to come into their office to complete documents. Terrific. Optional books, podcasts, and shows to watch about the opioid crisis. Yeah, so whatever the topic is, whatever the focus of your project, you'll want to help them start to understand. And especially in things like books, podcasts, and shows, easy way to get people becoming more informed. Tyler's talking about a peer-to-peer mentoring relationship in that organization. That sounds great. All right, we'll keep those ideas coming. We'll go ahead and move on. Want to take a moment just to kind of look back at where we've been and talk about what we've just covered. So we looked at these 6 stages of the VISTA recruitment process. We also looked at ways that you as a VISTA leader can be involved in each of those phases. Overall, we talked about how critical it is to think about and plan in advance and be focused on the skills, talents, and abilities that you need your VISTA recruits to bring with them. We focused on how to market your VISTA program to attract the best candidates. And we also talked about identifying the win-win, what's in it for them as well as for your organization or the community. Once we had identified candidates, we looked at screening and interviewing them and how to identify the best fit. Reference checks were part of the selection step. And now we've just been looking at how to keep candidates engaged to build their excitement and get them ready to start service. Got a few additional effective practices that I want to share. These were shared by VISTA supervisors. So there may be some things here that we haven't yet considered. One of them talked about starting early, 9 to 6 weeks in advance of when you want to bring on your VISTA members. And at least one recommended that starting in the spring seems to work best. If you can start with a really well-written ad, it makes your recruitment so much easier to do because it's really clear to communicate what they're going to be doing. You're going to want to recruit for a specific set of skills and other traits, as well as interest in national service. And a few of you have mentioned that as well, you know, the whole commitment piece. You can't do all of your recruitment at one point. You can't just like, okay, on day one, I'm going to get it all done and be done for the next 6 weeks or 10 weeks. You've got to be consistent week in, week out. One supervisor says she spends an average of 9 hours a week on member recruitment. Another suggestion was to enlist support to see if you can engage others, particularly in spreading the word. So that could be, you know, volunteers of the organization, other staff member, regardless of whether they're connected closely to the program or not, they can help spread the word. But then some of you have talked about how you engage site supervisors in the screening and interviewing process. So don't feel like you've got to do it on your own. Again, use word of mouth or some of these other social approaches like using LinkedIn, Twitter, Craigslist, Idealist, Handshake, any or all of the above. And then again, thinking about local candidates rather than a national search. If you've got high quality candidates who are already there, part of the community, then they're going to know their way around. They'll have connections and a less steep learning curve than someone who's got to pick up and move there, figure their way around, and then learn the project. All right, so maybe there's something you'll find useful in those suggestions from VISTA supervisors. So as I mentioned when we started, things of course are really unusual right now. Things are not business as normal. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the shifts that VISTA has made during COVID-19 to account for all the disruption that's happening in sponsoring organizations and service sites, and some of the ways that these might impact your recruitment. So first up is around teleservice. As I'm sure you all know, VISTA members can teleserve full-time starting on day one until further notice. But there are several requirements to go along with this. The sponsor has to confirm that the VISTA has the teleservice capabilities, that is, they've got the equipment and the connection and all the rest, as well as that there is a suitable assignment for the VISTA that can be done remotely. The sponsor still needs to provide orientation and training, so the OSAP plan may need to be updated to reflect the remote nature of that orientation. And I know a lot of you as VISTA leaders are involved with OSAP planning and development, so that may have some impact on your work as well. And every VISTA who teleserves has to complete and submit a teleservice agreement form. Of course, daily supervision is still required. There are some allowances for those who will relocate to serve. Teleservice from a member's home of record is permitted until it's safe for them to relocate to the project site. And then emergency leave, which you probably know is available to VISTAs who are currently serving, is not an option for new recruits. We don't want to bring people on and then immediately put them into emergency leave status. So the detail on these changes can be found in the VISTA FAQs, which are on the National Service Coronavirus page. The link, I believe, is posted, well, we'll post it in the chat. You'll see it on the screen there, but we'll copy that over. Oh, there it is, sorry, I see it now. So all the details are there. And of course, those FAQs get updated every week. So as things change, that's the one place to go to look. All right, so let's move on now and see what questions you have, or if there's any more discussion on ideas that were coming up earlier. So we've got the chat open for you. So it's a time not only for your questions, but also continue sharing ideas that took place earlier. So let's see. So Cheryl asks, is the teleservice agreement required of current VISTAs? It is. So if they are teleserving, they need to complete the teleservice agreement. It's a PDF form. You can download it from the campus. It's also there in the FAQs. There's a link to it. Pretty simple to fill out. And then it goes to the supervisor who approves it and sends it into the VISTA member support unit. So thank you for that question, Cheryl. Hannah says, a lot of people have been asking about a hiring freeze. Will that apply to VISTA in the future? So I'm not sure if you're asking about VISTA member positions or staffing at VISTA headquarters. But in terms of VISTA member positions, we see a greater need now and in the future for VISTA and all kinds of AmeriCorps members. And we also know that we have a lot of support from representatives in the Congress who see AmeriCorps as a strong resource for the country in something just like this. Here are some other questions. Javel, should the VMO align with the start date? Yes. So every VISTA member orientation is the official start date for VISTA members who are coming on for the first time. So you can check with your CNCF state or regional office to find out which of those dates your project can be bringing members on. They will be able to do that. Micah asks, at what point will we know if the May 11th BMO date is 100% happening? At this point, it's 100% happening. So there's no indication that it's not happening. So please proceed. Charlotte asks about once it's safe for VISTAs to relocate, how much time can we give them? This is covered in the FAQs. It's based on what's reasonable. So like she said, VISTAs who are going to be moving from East Coast to West. So in a case like that, the sponsor can allocate up to 5 days for that relocation to take place. That's 5 days for relocation. Let's see, Robin has a suggestion here. She lets other VISTA programs in the state know that they're what they're recruiting for and ask them what they're looking for. Because that way, if they get somebody who's interested initially and then turns out they don't want to serve in a rural community, they could refer them to another community. So great suggestion there, Robin. Thank you. Let's see, what else? All right, so is it possible that the stay-at-home orders are still in place so VEMA will move on to June? So to that question, our belief now is that organizations have had enough time to adjust to the current reality, all right? And so have had the opportunity to set up teleservice and set up the networks and equipment and all the things that would be required to teleserve. So in May, as long as your organization is set up that VISTAs can teleserve, even if there's a stay-at-home order in place, your VISTAs could begin. So we're hoping that with this much notice that your projects will be able to prepare for that and be ready to bring people on in May. Okay, so Pooja says she's in an intermediary site. So they're recruiting for their individual host sites. some of the sites have backed out due to hiring freeze. Is there a protocol for that for us to meet our host site numbers? So if a site that you were counting on has suddenly backed out, then you're going to want to work with your, and really it would be your project director who would do this, work with your state or regional office to see what's going to be the most effective way to respond to that. For instance, would one of the other sites be able to host 2 vistas instead of 1? You know, would that help? Or would you need to recruit new sites because that process could take longer? And with uncertainty, you know, that process could be slower. So I don't know that I have one single answer for that, but your state or regional office is going to be your best partner in a question like that. Let's see. See, Ryan got a question about unemployment assistance from someone who's furloughed from another job. Not quite sure what to say. I would point them to contact their local unemployment office about that. Of course, VISTA members don't qualify for unemployment for the VISTA service, but if they have other employment, they may. So that would be a question for unemployment. Delphine has a question about e-grants. When creating an account, you would need to work with the e-grants administrator at your sponsoring organization to set up your account. They'll be able to guide you in doing that and assigning the proper roles to that. Jacqueline has a question about direct service and capacity building. I didn't talk about this shift, but one of the areas of latitude is around the VISTA assignment description and the type of activities that VISTA members can work on. So now there is allowance for some direct service, or much more direct service by VISTA members. So she says they're not sure when the new normal will allow their projects to get back to more traditional capacity building. So right now we haven't specified an end time, an end date for that expanded direct service work. I think all of us are waiting to see, what happens in communities, what the needs look like, and so so right now it's allowed, and once we have a sense that will change, we'll give plenty of notice to projects about that. But I would say for now, do what makes the most sense. Of course, it's done in concert with your state or regional office, so they understand what those changes are. So I'm seeing a lot of different questions in here outside of recruitment. I'm going to try to focus mostly on recruitment, but Allie has a question she's asking if we can share ways that you all as leaders are keeping your current VISTAs engaged remotely and providing virtual support. So it's sort of an extension of engaging your candidates, but what are you doing to engage your current members? So so if you have ideas and want to share, feel free to do that. Allie, you might also post that question on the VISTA campus in the Leaders Forum, and engage even a wider audience of VISTA leaders around that question. It's a great question. Let's see. Yeah, so just checking to see if there are other recruitment related questions here, and I think we've covered them, but let me check. There are a couple more coming in. I'm seeing a lot of great suggestions to Ali's question about engagement, so thank you for all of those. All right. Well, not seeing any more questions, this might be a good time for us to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you for all the questions that you have put in and all of your tips and suggestions and ideas for each other. It's all been really great to have all this participation. Before we depart, I want to invite you to complete a short evaluation of this webinar. There's a SurveyMonkey page that will appear in your browser window once you exit the Zoom. It's just, I think, 12 quick questions, so it only takes a minute or two to fill out. So thank you for doing that. I also want to thank our production team, Kim Adams and Jeff Banas at LSI, for producing the session. And of course, thank you for joining us and all your participation. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.